Hey, hey, and welcome back to another episode of Our Love Story Q&A with a couples counselor. How's my favorite couples counselor?
Hi, I'm great. How are you doing?
Doing awesome. So nice to see your face. Can't believe that we are knocking on August door.
I know, it's crazy, right?
Which means we've done how many of these episodes so far?
Gosh, I don't even know how many we're up to now.
I know. I feel like we're going to be working on our third year here pretty soon.
We are. I think it was December, so I think we're almost there.
I agree. So super exciting stuff. As you guys know, if you've been following us, Dyanna and I sit down and we talk about a different topic that is affecting couples, whether you're married or whether you're just together, it's okay. But we talk a lot about couple stuff and figuring out this whole relationship thing because it's not easy, Dyanna. I mean, how many people have you spoken to in all your years that tell you, no, marriage is really easy? Being a couple is just, it's super easy. It's fine.
I can confidently say none.
Yeah, exactly. Because even those couples that you see, okay, let's face it, Facebook land is not reality land, right? But even those couples that you might know in real life that seem to have it all together, seem to be super happy, they still have things too, right? Like it's just, I don't know if struggle is the right word because I feel like that might be a little negative, but it's work, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that's the reality of it, is it isn't just like easy peasy all the time. There's a lot of work that goes into maintaining and fostering a relationship. People change over time, and so do relationships. So if you're not consistently working at it and putting the intentional effort behind it, it's not going to be as healthy as you want it to be.
Right. And I feel like that's a really good kind of lead into today's topic. And we'll get into why I think that here in just a minute. But the topic is, and again, I think I coined the term. So y'all tell me out there if it's actually out there and I didn't coin it, but I'm feeling all brilliant today. But divorce remorse. So how do we avoid divorce remorse? And what I mean by that is I was telling Dyanna before the show, I don't know if I just have my eyes open for it or if for some reason I'm catching the key words because, we do this show and, in my business, I focus on divorcing couples as well. But I'm seeing posts out there from mainly moms, because that's mostly who I follow, that are saying, you know what? I wish I never would have got divorced. I wish I would have put a little bit more work into it. The fact that I had to ask him to take out the garbage doesn't bother me so much now when I think about our little family and what our little family was like. And I just want my little family back again. Mm-hmm. Have you had any, obviously you can't name names or anything, I know that, but have you had any conversations like this, or have you noticed that maybe in your practice and in your work that this can happen and does happen?
Sure. I think that with any major adjustment like that, especially with divorce, you tend to reflect a lot. And part of that is part of the grief process, right? So even though like nobody died, like it's still grief nonetheless. There's been a major adjustment. And there's some grief associated with that. So I think there's some reflection and thinking like, oh, am I still in the bargaining stage? Like maybe if I would have done this differently, or if I had worked a little harder at this, or maybe if I didn't nag so much about this, then like we wouldn't have gotten divorced, right? But that's really 50% of the equation. Like the other partner is the other half, right? So like maybe if we could have done something different and maybe we had different tools or could have learned things differently, we could have had a different outcome. I think when we're reflecting on our own selves, we think about our past experiences, like certainly like, childhood experiences for sure, but like past relationships, and trying to identify, was there something that I saw in my partner or recognize my partner that felt familiar and like kind of an icky way. And maybe like I am part of like a little bit of an avoidance attachment, right? And maybe there was something that I identified in them that I did not love, and I had a really hard time coming back from that. So what if I had maybe done some work on myself to identify where that's coming from? Would that have played a role in the relationship? And maybe it would have had a different outcome,
Mm-hmm. That sounds to me like we're kind of maybe venturing into the topic of steps that you can take to avoid divorce remorse. Now, I know because I was one of them. So we all know I was divorced before. Matt's my second husband, right? I've told that story. I didn't go through any sort of couples counseling with my previous marriage.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know if we had a heart-to-heart conversation about what each one of us held for expectations in the marriage that wasn't being fulfilled. I was very young, and I'm not sitting here making excuses for myself because there certainly are things that I wish I did differently. But therapy was not on my radar, Dyanna.
Yeah. Yeah, that's understandable. I mean, I like to think that we're getting better, and I think the younger generation right now is really curious about emotional intelligence and like relationships, more so than previous generations, obviously. But I don't think it's lost on me that there are people who choose not to go the couples counseling route, not because maybe they didn't think of it, but maybe there was just a part of them that just didn't want it to work. You know what I mean? And that's certainly a thing for some people, right? They just they don't want a solution. They don't want to see what's on the other side of this, because that usually requires some deep introspection about yourself, and also identifying things maybe about your partner that are hard to accept. And maybe there's some things that you can't change, and that's also hard to accept. So sometimes logically, it seems like it's just the easier thing just to say like, no, we're beyond that. Like, it's nothing's going to help. It just is what it is. I've made up my mind. You know what I mean? And not to say that that's everyone's case, but it certainly does play a role, a little bit of that avoidance of the unknown, and knowing how hard it is to go through couples counseling, and how hard it is to go through that process, and the vulnerability that comes out, and, you know, all the unpleasantness that's just right out there on Front Street. You know what I mean? Just some people don't want to participate in that.
It's what you just brought up just blew my mind, because I'm thinking back to, again, this is a long time ago for me, right? So like well over a decade. And I'm thinking back to where was my mind when I was contemplating. So I was the one that pushed for it. So where was I at? And if you and I would have had a conversation and you would have said, well, is this something that you just want and you really don't see it going a different direction, I would have had to take a step back and be real honest with myself, probably whip out the piece of paper and do the whole pros and cons thing even. Mm-hmm. You know, mm-hmm. Remember that old thing from decision making back in the day? I don't know how I would have been able to answer that question. So how can somebody kind of, because there's so many emotions, and I'm just like, they're brimming up for me right now, right? Just even thinking about who I was and what my mindset was back then. How can we help somebody help themselves eliminate the chatter and the noise that might be going on in their head, and really break down, look, do I want this to work? Am I willing to put the work into it? Or do I just want the door?
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Or do I want it to work? Right. Mm-hmm. Not only can I see it working, but like, do I want it to? And then there's the idea of, well, if I admit to myself that I don't want it to work, what does that say about me?
Right.
Like, I am supposed to, you know, I chose to be married, so I should want it to work. I should want to put the effort in to make this better. Like, these are things that I should be doing, you know what I mean? And so if I don't feel that way, it's not really something I want to sit with or marinate in. So I might just avoid that too. And it might just be easier just to say, no, I really don't want it. You know what I mean? Just to avoid all of that vulnerability and digging into, you know, potential guilt or shame around it. You know what I mean? Sure, a classic cost benefit analysis, is sometimes helpful for humans to identify, or pros and cons, right? Sometimes that's necessary, especially in divorce, especially if you have kids and multiple assets and things like that. Like, you got to run a cost benefit analysis. Like, what is this going to cost us to stay together? What is it going to cost us to separate? You know what I mean? But so many of those costs and benefits are not tangible. You know what I mean? Like, so many of them are, like cars, houses, all of those things are tangible. But what do you have to gain and what do you have to lose to either trying to make it work or not? Right? Like, I might not see the benefit of making it work if maybe I've met someone else. Maybe I don't see the benefit of making it work if, I stand to, if I'm going to inherit some money and I won't be splitting it if I'm by myself. And so I can support myself and take care of myself. How motivated am I going to be to make something work if I feel like there might be something not in it for me as a person, right? There's certainly that thought process there. And then the untangible things of making it work. So, like, what does that mean? Like, how much investment is going to be required? Is it going to be counseling? How long is it going to take? How much is it going to cost? What can we expect? You know what I mean? What are we putting our kids through in the meantime? You know what I mean? There's so many of those intangible things that are harder to process, and certainly way more than others. You know what I mean? So sure, cost benefit analysis, measuring out the pros and cons again. But it's not always that simple when it comes to emotion.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. So do you have, and this could be a giant answer, I realize that. But do you have sort of an idea of maybe some steps that somebody should or could take in order to really make sure that this is the right move for us? There is no other move for us. Because again, we're trying to avoid divorce remorse and being like, oh, gee, now that it's over, I really wish it wasn't over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think the first step that you would want to take is understanding what your expectations are. Like, what is your expectation of what life is going to look like if you're divorced? And what's your expectation for what life is going to look like if you stay married? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So identifying like what your expectations are. Also identifying like, how much gas do you have in the tank? You know what I mean? Like, if this has been a really long time and you have some deep resentment and you're really unhappy and you just don't see any other alternative, then probably staying together isn't going to be the ideal for you. But if you can identify how much gas you have left, that maybe with counseling, I have 6 months, you know what I mean? Which is kind of a typical discernment period for people going to couples counseling, is give it 6 months. If after 6 months, you've made a decision that like, we're not staying together, then you gave it like a solid 6 months to discern that. Right. Mm-hmm. And so determining like, identifying how much gas do I have? How much effort do I want to put into this? And how much effort do I want to put into ending this relationship? You know what I mean? Kind of goes back to the expectations too about what is my life going to look like afterwards. Obviously, there's going to be a financial adjustment. There's going to be new partners. There's going to be your ex-partner meeting new people and exposing them to your kids. There's like, that's just like the tip of the iceberg of things that you can expect, you know, when you get divorced. So calibrate your expectations, identify how much gas you have in the tank to create change. You know what I mean? And talking to like your partner, you know, ideally it doesn't always work out that way, especially in situations where, you know, obviously we're not talking about situations where there's DV or abuse, you know, domestic violence, anything like that. Like we're not talking about that. We're talking about like irreconcilable differences. We just can't make it work anymore. We're not happy, infidelity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, whatever your reasons are, right? Like really talking to your partner about like, okay, if we have children, how is this going to affect them as well? And what do we want this post-divorce period to look like? What are your expectations of me as a co-parent? What are my expectations of you? Almost having an agreement, right? Of like, how long do we wait before our kids meet a potential new partner? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
What is the way that we're going to communicate? Are we going to do text, email, phone call? How often should we talk? Should I expect to talk to the kids when they're at your house, or you when they're at my house? The more that you can align as co-parents, and I know we've touched on this before in a previous episode, but the more that you guys can align together, the less likely you are to have that remorse afterwards, outside of like the obvious grieving process of the relationship, you know? So expectations, identifying, you know, how much willpower you have to either make this work or don't, and really aligning with your partner to have like the best co-parenting outcome as possible if kids are involved.
I love that. And I know exactly which episode you're talking about. And I'm going to pop the link to that episode in the show notes. So that way our audience, if they want to link back to that, they can catch that episode as well. Makes it real easy for them. Now, let's maybe dive a little bit deeper into the therapy piece, because I mean, you tell me this is what you do. People can go to therapy and not necessarily, and just kind of go through the motions, but not necessarily utilize that to the best of their ability, right?
100%.
Do you have any examples about what that might look like where somebody's underutilizing your benefit?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's not something that's uncommon, for, you know, there's the person, or in this case, the couple that's like willing to participate in this together. Like they both want to do this, right? And then there's the person that's coming in just because their partner asked them to. And then there's the person that's completely unwilling to do this, right? And so once that's like three different types of people that come to therapy, right? And so if we've identified that it's like an ultimatum situation, like either we go to couples counseling, we try to figure this out, or we're going to get divorced. Well, I don't want to get divorced because it's going to be expensive. It's going to be an adjustment, you know, this, that's, and that, and the other. So I'll go, you know what I mean? I'll go so that I can sleep better at night, knowing that like I did everything that I could possibly do, right? And just sort of like go through those motions, without really getting into like the really deep work. It is impossible to go through couples counseling and create like sustainable change without digging really deep. You know what I mean? And it's uncomfy. You know what I mean? Anyone that goes into couples counseling should be prepared for some discomfort. You know what I mean? But if you're the person that's only coming in because your partner wants you to, or you're the partner that doesn't want to be there at all, you're probably going to be pretty unwilling to go there. You know what I mean? But you're only going to get out of it what you put in. So if what you want to get out of it is, oh, we spent 6 months doing this, that was fun, we're still going to get a divorce, you know what I mean? Then sure, that's what, you know, you're going to put very minimal in as to what you're trying to get out, you know what I mean? But if you're willing to be uncomfortable and do the work, you're going to get out of it what you put into it. You know what I mean? The more blood, sweat, and tears that you put into it, the more sustainable a result you will get. And to be 100% fair, not everyone that goes to couples counseling comes out of it and stays together, right? And like sometimes they go through this process and they determine, you know what, like I respect you as a person, but like our values don't align anymore. We're just not compatible for X, Y, and Z reasons. Like I want the best for you. I just don't think we're good partners anymore. Like we're just not there anymore. You know what I mean? Sometimes that happens, but when you're putting in the work, that's how you discover that. And that's how you get there. You know what I mean? It might not be the outcome that one or both people really desired, but it is the outcome that you arrived at because you put in the work. You know what I mean?
And I feel like there's value in that, because let's fast forward, that same couple goes through counseling, figures that out about themselves. They're going to deepen their connection in counseling, whether or not that means they stay together, right? So they're going to have, like you said, a certain amount of respect or an understanding for the other one that they may not have previously had, because we learn these things. And does that then help them set themselves up for a better uncoupling co-parenting relationship, right? Like I feel like there's value in that.
So much value in that. There's not only value in that as like from a co-parenting perspective, but also that person has learned a lot about themselves and how they move in relationships. You know what I mean? So they might know how to identify quicker, like qualities or traits that they tend to be more attracted to, you know what I mean? That are maybe part of an unhealthy cycle. So they're going to be more able to identify what those things are, but also what their role is in it. So like if someone identifies like, oh, I learned in couples counseling that like I have avoidant attachment. So I am likely to avoid really tough conversations. And I know that how that can cause problems in my relationships because I'm not really willing to talk about things. I also know as part of my avoidant attachment, if I recognize something in my partner that I really don't like, it's really hard for me to come back from that. So I know that that's like an attachment thing. And that's something that like I have to be very cognizant of in my future relationships. You know what I mean? So you're still going to take a lot of things away about yourself and how you move in relationships, and might even learn more about what you expect in relationships that looks different than what you thought. You know what I mean? What you went into it going in thinking like, these are the qualities I want in a partner. You might come out of it thinking like, you know, number 2 and 3 are really not that important. Actually, like I want these things instead. You know what I mean? And you're going to be looking for those things, and a partner in the future is only going to set that person up for a healthier potential relationship because they did that work, you know?
Yeah. And I feel like that's going to bleed into not necessarily romantic relationships too. That could bleed into friendships, the relationship you have with your parents, the relationship you have with your kids. Because if you know that about yourself and you've done that deeper dig, right? And you understand what triggers you and you understand what your attachment style is, I feel like that's going to help you in all directions.
Absolutely. Because we all know that our adult selves are, you know, remnants and byproducts of our childhood, right? And we tend to either repeat cycles and behaviors that we saw, or we tend to have a reactive behavior to those things that we experienced, right? Kind of goes into that, like the inner child stuff that's in there too, you know what I mean? That dictates some of our behavior. So absolutely, it can have a positive impact on all of our relationships, might allow us some extra bandwidth to set boundaries with people that maybe we didn't have before, or maybe having firmer boundaries with people that we didn't have before, because we understand like how that impacts us as individuals, and therefore how it shows up in our relationships with people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love it. Any other suggestions or anything that floats to the top of your mind when we talk about divorce remorse? And anything that we haven't touched on that you think is important to share?
Yeah, I mean, divorce sucks, right? Like no matter how you slice it, like it sucks.
Totally.
If you sit in the discomfort to identify again your expectations, how much bandwidth do I have left to do this, before you go into the divorce, you're going to feel more confident about your decision, right? And be able to maybe a little bit easier to recognize, is this part of my grief process that I'm experiencing right now? Or is this like regret? And if it's regret, what exactly am I regretting? Am I regretting the family unit, or am I regretting the person? Am I regretting the financial stability, or am I regretting the person? You know what I mean? Like, what is it exactly? And can I get those things elsewhere? And does the benefit of that outweigh all of the costs that I've identified in the relationship, which is why, you know, we ended it for whatever reason, you know? And if you're going through the couples counseling process ahead of that, like, please just be as transparent as possible when you're in couples counseling. You know what I mean? Again, you're only going to get out of it what you put in. But there's been, you know, there's so many times over the years where, you know, couples will come in and we're working through conflict resolution and, you know, attachment, communication, emotional intimacy, physical intimacy, all these things, right? And then, you know, surprise, one day it's like, okay, so we're going to split up. And I'm okay, like I support that, but like, tell me what's going on. You know what I mean? Like, how did you guys arrive at that decision? Oh, well, you know, my partner didn't want to say anything in here, and then they dropped this like big, huge thing that's like, holy smokes, we should have been talking about that months ago. So all of the other work that we've been doing has been valuable, but it's been more surface because this other thing is huge. And that's like, you can't get around that. You know what I mean?
So be honest and tell your counselor everything, because I know that they ask. I've been through it. They say, is there anything else?
We do. And like, and we're not judgy. We're not critical. Like, that's not our job. Like, we're there to be objective. You know what I mean? Like, we're not going to judge or criticize you at all. And yes, when you do go for your first appointment, like, you've got a bunch of intake documents to fill out, and it might feel like, oh my God, this is so much paperwork. And it is. But I can tell you that we appreciate when that's as, comprehensive as possible, and like you really spent some time on it, because we can tell if you did it in 5 minutes, and we can tell if you spent a little bit more substantial time on it, to give us just like all of the details, because it only helps us. We only know what we know. And so if you keep your information very limited, we're going to have no idea. You know what I mean? We're not even going to know what to look for or what to dig for, right? And so if you are the partner in couples counseling that feels like, ooh, I don't want to say these things because my partner's going to get upset if I bring it up in here, like, that's okay. Like, I can definitely help you with that, right? Like, there's no secrets in couples counseling. One of my policies is no secrets, right? Because that's the antithesis of building trust, right?
Yeah.
But if you were to reach out to me and be like, hey, like, there's some things that like I really want to bring up, but they're delicate and I'm not really sure how to do that. Like, how can I do that? I can certainly help with that, right? Like, I can help, bring it into the room in a way that's like bringing awareness, in a way that's not going to put the other person on the defensive. You know what I mean? You certainly can't predict how people are going to behave in every situation. But if I don't know, I can't bring it into the room, and therefore you're going to continue to show up to couples counseling. You're going to learn these different tools and things like that are working from a communication perspective, but there's still going to be this big thing that's obviously a pain point for you that isn't going to get resolved because I have no idea. And 6 months later, like, what did you get what you wanted out of this? Like, did you get what you wanted out of this experience? You know what I mean? Not having dug through all of the things that were there. So be transparent. It's uncomfy. It feels super vulnerable, and you're talking to a stranger about sex and parenting and trauma and all of the things, right? It feels super weird at first. And that's where finding the right fit, comes in clutch, right? You want to make sure you have a really good relationship with that therapist. Do your homework, do as many consultations as you can, feel the person out. We've done another episode about like what questions to ask, you know what I mean? So that you have that rapport, have that relationship, so that you feel more comfortable, at least a little bit more comfortable after a few sessions, going into some of those deeper topics, because they're important. You know what I mean? There shouldn't be anything left unsaid in that process at all.
I agree 100%. And I'm going to pop that episode, because I know exactly which one you're talking about with the questions. I'm going to pop that in there. And, I just want to share that personally, I appreciated having a stranger as our counselor. Because of that reason, I actually felt more comfortable sharing the good, the bad, and the ugly than I would have if I had a relationship, or even just even a friendly acquaintance sort of relationship with that person. It might have been different,
Yeah, totally. Because we have objectivity. Like, we don't know you outside of this room. You know what I mean? So, and our job is literally not to like judge or criticize anything you say. It's just to help. Like, that's our role, is to help. You know what I mean? That's why we've talked about this in previous episodes too. Like, it's nice to be able to talk to family and friends and stuff like that when you're going through, relationship conflict and stuff. But it's like impossible to get them to be objective. You know what I mean? Like, people tend to pick sides. People tend to put their opinions in there and stuff like that. And so there is value in having that stranger, you know what I mean, provide that objectivity. And that stranger happens to just be, well qualified and trained to help you navigate through those things too.
Yes, absolutely. So I don't know if this is going on for you, but I am having some issue on my end with our session now. And so I'm going to say, let's end it here. And I hope that I hope we're still on live, because I don't know for sure. But anyway, as always, I super appreciate you, all of your expertise.
Thank you.
And you're still doing the consultations, correct?
Yes, you can schedule a 15-minute phone consultation on my website. It's DyannaEiselTherapy.com.
Awesome. And that's the best way to connect with you, or is Facebook okay? Or like what do you prefer for somebody getting in touch?
Absolutely. So my website, you can schedule a consultation. Also, you could just email me, Dyanna@DyannaEiselTherapy.com. That's usually the quickest way to get a hold of me too.
Awesome. All right, everybody. If you want to check out any of our previous episodes, we talked about a couple of them on the show today, which I will pop in the show notes here pretty soon. So that way you guys have that. Are you still seeing me, Dyanna?
I see green.
Yeah, something is going on. Oh, and we're back. Cool. Well,
there you are.
Yes. Hopefully that showed up okay on everybody's end. If not, I'll clip that out before I publish this one. But anyway, if you want to check out any of those previous episodes, as we talked about, we have done so many. We don't even know off the top of our head how many. Hop over to our YouTube channel. It is at Mom Nation USA. That's our handle. Scroll down just a little bit. You will see the playlist for OLS, which is our love story Q&A with a couples counselor. If you prefer the podcast style, on your favorite podcast platform, do a quick search for Mom Nation Talk Radio. And there you can connect with us, download, rate us, do all the things. Do a rating, please, because that's really helpful for us. I was checking out some of the ratings that I didn't even know that we got on Apple Podcasts the other day. So that was really fun. I appreciate all of you guys following us, and we will see you next time. All right, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.